Good evening. The time is 5:30 PM on October 28th, 2024, and we are starting our work session. We'll be opening that up with a city update from Mr. Brian McCain.
Thank you, ma'am. Just want to remind everybody that the Public Utilities Commission town halls are tomorrow and Wednesday, the 29th and 30th. They're here, downstairs at Memorial Hall from 5 to 8 PM each night. ASL and Spanish interpretation provided on Tuesday, tomorrow, October 29th. Both sessions will be live streamed on Channel 17 and the City of Pueblo Facebook page. Sign up to speak in person for up to 3 minutes. If you cannot attend, you can still contact the PUC and let them know your thoughts on the Black Hills proposed 18% rate increase. The information is on the city's homepage under Black Hills Public Comments. We are going to have Halloween at City Hall with trick or treating. Public is invited to come trick or treating at City Hall on Thursday, October 31st from 3 to 5. Candy will be provided by the city departments inside City Hall, and the entrance to use will be the one on the Angelo side by the Sarah Shaw statue. So come in that direction and bring your kids and costumes and get some candy. The discount days, October 28th through November 8th, this weekend's Team Up to Clean Up event was a huge success. Over 750 cars came through the Colorado State Fairgrounds, 400 cars at CSU Pueblo Thunderbolt location, and 109 at the Stockyard Road Recycle Works for the green waste cleanup. We also handed out over 100 vouchers to help folks dump at the transfer station. If you missed the Team Up to Clean Up event, don't worry. Discount days are October 28th through November 8th, the Waste Connection Southside Landfill. 50% discount for city residents with zip codes of 81001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8. And you must show a valid ID or current city bill, no commercial vehicles or commercial waste accepted. Help pick up Pueblo and dump your trash at a discounted rate. Parks and Rec, only a few days left to register for these fun new classes at El Centro del Quinto Sol. Call 719-553-2790. Come to 800 Goodnight Avenue to register by Thursday, October 31st. The fitness games for kids ages 6 to 10 will take place on Wednesday evening, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We invite all youth to have fun in this organized physical activity program focused on exercise, improving athletic abilities, and engaging with other youth and adults. Pre-K Play offers a playtime from 3 to 5-year-olds to explore, play, and grow in a fun, safe environment. This program will take place on Wednesday mornings from 10 to 11 a.m. And that concludes my updates.
All righty. Well, thank you. Is there anything from council tonight? Okay, well, we'll get started with our first topic of the evening and the only topic for the rest of the evening, and that is the 2025 budget work session.
Thank you, Councilor Maestri. Tonight is wrap up for the council for our 2025 budget presentation. Over the last week, I've received a couple questions from Councilor Gomez, and I sent you the question and the reply. The questions that he asked, one of the questions being, he wanted to see the salary increases in 2023 and 2024. And so in the chart in front of you and on the projector, it's provided the appointed management, general services, fire, and police, and you can see what the unions negotiated, what the city agreed to in 2023, 2024, and what 2025 looks like. So you can see the appointed and management, a 2.8% increase, which is significantly lower than the previous 2 years. Same thing with general services. This is our second year of fire, so we're at a 7%. And then the first of 3 years with the police department with the 10% raise and the 7% for officers, 10% for sergeants at the $1.6 million. So I thought that this was a good question that Councilor Gomez had, and I just wanted to share it with the rest of council. On the next slide is I put together some numbers. I know that the zoo has been reaching out to the council. They've been reaching out to my office and chief of staff, and Councilor Flores had asked some questions about where we got the the amount for the zoo and why we were funding what we were funding. And so we broke down the numbers from you, and as you can see, from 2020 to 2025, the operational increase ask has been from about 1.2 million. That's their ask this year, and in 2020, it was 675,000, so it's grown close to about $500,000 just over the last 4 years. The next graph that you'll see is the city funding versus total expenses. So from 2018 to 2025, you'll see their asks ranging from 637,000 to 1.1 in 2025. You can see it has grown substantially from 2018, and of course, when the city had funding to do so, we moved up the zoo's budget. Last year was one of those years where the zoo came back and spoke to the council, and they had an increase. And then the third line down is going to be the percentage of their total expenses, and you can see how that has increased from 2018 to 2025 in their ask almost 10%. So previously their ask was to cover about 28.8% of their total budget in 2018, and now we're up to 38.3. I think my recommendation to fund this is 903,000. So this is 270,000 less their request for this year, 159,000 less their request from 2024, and 26,000 less their request from 2023. And then I wanted to pull together and show you kind of their approved budget and their working budget and how their funds come in. One part that I saw that they could potentially make improvements would be is their grants. They've received $80,000 in their 2024 budget and grant funding, and they are only projected to about $75,000 in grant funding for 2025. So I know with budget cuts coming, we kind of did a deep dive on what they presented and how they would bring funding in. And this was one area that we saw was low when it comes to grants. Any questions on this slide or anything about the zoo?
Any questions? Councillor Flores.
I'm still trying to understand how you're analyzing all of the nonprofits, and since that's a new position. And one of the things that you can say about the Art Center, about the zoo, about the two chambers, is that they bring tourists into town. So that if they got gate receipts, and they charge such a small amount so that everybody has an opportunity to go into the zoo. I'm surprised by that number. It's pretty high, but that number doesn't tell us where we're getting those people from. Is it the Arkansas Valley? Is it other parts of Colorado? Are they tourists? What we don't see is the consequential money that is spent in the city of Pueblo, because we're able to bring people into the Art Center, into the zoo, into other areas, like the Chamber of Commerce bringing in tourists into our event center. So there's an opportunity there to look at that number and say, is it times 4 that amount? It's like, again, it's the consequential money that we get of somebody staying in a hotel room, going to a restaurant, going to the mall, of new money that are tourists. And so I'm still trying to understand, because I believe that as you analyzed all of these nonprofits, you guys never met with them one-on-one. It was all done. On this one, you did, but it's after the fact. So explain to me, should that be considered? It's almost like shooting ourselves in the foot and cutting back on operating money that maybe we should be increasing in those areas to get more money that comes in because of tourism.
I would tell you, Counselor, that the process was very thorough and thoughtful. This was the first time they had to submit an application like we spoke last Monday night, and they had to create a narrative and show what the dollars that we give them, how they're spent, how they increase tourism, how they could increase tax revenue. But what I will tell you is sales tax is down. So as we continue to fund the chamber, the zoo, the art center, these entities that are bringing tourism dollars into the city, I'm not quite sure where they're spending their money because I don't know, quite frankly, why sales tax is down 0.07% year to date. The city is not taking in the same kinds of money that it had been taking in previously when people had money to travel. So although all of these entities bring tourism and are great for the city of Pueblo, I don't necessarily agree with you that providing more operational money for them is going to drive tourism dollars into the city because we're not seeing it. We didn't see it in 2023 or 2024, excuse me, or 2025.
It's possible. It's possible that the figures could be worse.
It
and
is.
that maybe, so maybe the nonprofits could be given credit for at least keeping ourselves at a certain level. Because I know, I mean, this is an area I used to work with 100 nonprofits in this community for my whole career, 42-year career. And I just, I just have to push back in a lot of areas because I don't think, number one, it's such a new thing that you guys started here. I don't like the fact that they were given a month to put it in their paperwork. Nobody met with them.
They were given about 6 weeks.
A month.
6 weeks, yeah.
It was 4 weeks. And the other thing is there was no communication with them in person. On the smaller ones I could see, but some of these that are $1 million.
There
700.
was several.
I've talked to about seven of
Several
the
follow-ups.
large ones. They never had face-to-face contact
I think
during the process.
Melissa
during the
went out
process.
and visited several of the nonprofits that submitted in the millions.
Well, I must be missing the ones because they've all told me that they were told after the decisions were made, nobody was contacted one-on-one. And but we'll, this is a long process here. And at the appropriate time, we'll continue discussing that later. Thank you.
Counselor Gomez.
Yeah, I guess that's based on the assumption that all nonprofits are created equal, and that's not the case. And, I've had a hard time understanding some of the information they don't provide or what they're not doing for themselves. I mean, there's got to be an expiration date where you're going to get off the dole eventually. It's 3 years, is it 5 years? Some of these nonprofits are in there for a long time, and some serve a very good process for the people, and they could probably be a department, I think, in the long run. When I look at the money that's gone out there, and I talk about, if they're doing the need to do funding, if they don't have to, if they get the money from us, are they doing the proper grants and applying? Are they even having a bake sale? I mean, I look at this stuff and just saying, we need working nonprofits to help themselves as well. I understand what you're saying, but like I said, they're not all created equal.
They're not on the dole. They're providing services in the community.
All of them?
Well, the ones that this didn't happen yesterday. This has been a process that goes over at least in my case, 7 years that I've been on city council. So a lot of what was established here had been well thought through. Otherwise, we wouldn't have agreed to do it. But to say that people that actually create jobs in town, provide social programs that help children, that help the arts community, which we should be concerned about, that help so many other areas. And to say that they're on the dole when most of the stuff that we give them doesn't even represent.
Okay, what I'm saying to you is, listen, I know you've been at this a long time, okay, and I have, but I'm telling you what I just see when we got 0.1% sales tax, user fees are down, when all that's not coming in, at what point do you say, we better cut somewhere? I think our backs are against the corner, and I mentioned this about what they're doing nonprofits, and they took a surgical knife, as far as I can see, they took a surgical knife to it instead of an axe. So it's not going to make everybody happy. I got it. But we got to accept the fact that we've got to start doing some budget cutting because it's bad.
I don't disagree with that. But to isolate them and separately as though they're different than anyone else, they provide jobs. In fact, 6% of all the jobs in Pueblo are with nonprofit organizations. When they get a check, they pay their taxes, just like you and I, Social Security, federal, state. They use their money to go spend in the community, just like we do. So they pay sales tax. So there's a lot more to this than just us, looking at them as though they're in a situation where they're dire and that we're providing them with the dollars that we do, which, by the way, don't even represent 1.5% of the budget. So if you guys are serious about cutting the budget, this is not the area. This is a distraction to me.
Well, that's
And
to you.
it's a distraction because it's such a small amount. If you guys are serious about cutting the budget, let's start looking at where the money is at. And that's in salaries.
Well, we had a bump in the road with a thing called opera funds. That stuff was spent like confetti. Let's be realistic.
Mhm.
All the funds that we have coming in, and you're trying to make the argument that all nonprofits don't have to be looked at, and there could be some cuts that can be made. If that's not, they're not doing their job if they're not looking at it. They're trying. This is the first time I've ever seen a mayor and her group trying to at least cut back realistically. All these nonprofits are not the same. They're all different. Some provide us with all the information, some don't. Sometimes it's partial. Sometimes when I first got in there was sometimes the vetting wasn't even completely done. They still got money. So I've been around just a little bit now.
Okay, anyone else? Mayor, this is a new process. We didn't get Melissa in place until May? Was it April or May? And so she's had to go through and she's basically having to restructure and create policies and procedures. And we have to prioritize. One of the things I would like to see in conjunction with Councilor Flores is we probably need to do some just minor data statistics on, is our zoo ever going to be feasible? At what point is it even, if it's even going to be feasible to the community? Because I know a lot of people, citizens that go up to the Colorado Springs Zoo. And what is the comparison? What is the draw from the Colorado Springs view to zoo to our zoo? Are we bringing in really tourism when it comes to our zoo? Because you go 30 miles further and the zoo is a completely different type of zoo. It's a bigger zoo. It's got more animals to offer. And these are it's come to the time that we're having to look to see what is feasible and not feasible in this community, because as we continue to struggle, what can we support and not support? So I'm glad that you guys are doing your homework and, about raising the fees to go to the zoo. I mean, that's a we have to have that information to see if, we should raise the fees and so forth. So, but you guys are just in the early stages. You just became mayor. Melissa's just come on board here and now we're in budget. And I know that we covered a lot in the last 2 years to make sure that they were competitive on their employment salaries and so forth with a lot. So I think that's been covered. So I guess, I appreciate your recommendations. Anyone else?
I guess to Counselor Maestri's point, when I met with the zoo, they do have that data that you're talking about, Counselor Maestri, from a third party. Dr. Wakefield at CSU Pueblo, who's an economist and a professor there, actually did a return on investment for the zoo. And they did find that there was substantial money dumped into the community as a result of tourism for the zoo. So the zoo does have a report. I'm sure that Abby Kraus can share that with you if you want to see those numbers. I think that we should also note for the record that there's a difference between our contracts, which the zoo falls under one, and non-departmentals, which I think Roger was referencing earlier. So I just wanted to note that, you know, the zoo is one of those contracts, just like the Humane Society, where they're providing, you know, one of those essential services for the city. On a contractual basis, not necessarily the other non-departmental agencies. So I wanted to note that for the record as well.
Well, I think that the CSU data is probably important, unless it's dated, because you know, as little as 2 years ago, everything was great. There was a lot of things that we as a community looked forward to. But as we can see since then, there's been a major decline in that showing in the revenue that we're receiving. Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'm not passionate about this for no reason. And I wanted to at least set the table clear here that if you look at our charter, the mayor has the responsibility of putting her budget in place completely. But if you go to section 710 of the city charter, I'm going to read this because it's only 4 lines long. The city charter indicates after conclusion of such public hearing, the council may insert new items of expenditures or may increase or decrease or strike out items of expenditures, except that no item of appropriation for debt service shall be reduced. If the council shall decrease the total proposed expenditures, such decrease shall be reflected in the tax levy. If the council shall increase the total proposed expenditures, such increase shall be reflected in the tax levy or be appropriate provisions and other revenues. So I'm not doing this just to talk into thin air and be angry about it or nice about it. It's our responsibility as a council under the charter to look at the budget. And if we disagree, we can disagree. This is just business at the end of the day. So I wanted all of you, if you don't know, we have that responsibility.
You know, and I don't disagree with you, Counselor Flores. I would like to, mention that we have been running in the red for the past 2 years that I've been on council in the millions, tens of millions of dollars. And that's just something as a council we need to really consider when we are approving this final budget. And anyone else?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
In reference to, I think it was Mark that brought up the 10,000 people population growth in Pueblo and how we keep on expanding services and the salaries to meet that. And that's what in the last, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer than that, Mark? Do you know how long that 10,000, how we've grown for 10, how many, 50 years?
Mhm.
And we've basically almost doubled it. What we take to take care of the government now at the same population. So that's something we're gonna have to rein in, whether we like it or not. It's gonna be tough. Nobody says it's gonna be easy. And I know Dennis has a heart for folks that are trying to help the city, but we're gonna make some tough decisions. I mean, we're hurting, folks. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
one of the other non-departmentals that Counselor Flores has brought attention to is the Art Center. My recommendation was taking it back to zero funding. They were one of the ones that we looked at, that this is not a city-owned facility, like the Harp or other areas that we own. And if you look back to 2018, they had never had a non-departmental ask. From 2018 to 2025, it's grown 600%. So this is another one that we looked at decreasing, number one, because it's not a city-owned building. And number two, you've seen the extreme increase from 2018 to 2025 at 600%. Any questions on the Art Center?
I have some questions.
Counselor Latino.
So it's not a city-owned operation, but yet it brings a tremendous amount of outside organizations, events, into this community. And basically, having an art center puts us in a cultural paradigm. I don't know. I just, I have some real concerns as it relates to that. I mean, Councilman Aliff and myself attended the event that the international boxing event that was here. We attended the opening, and he did a great job in his opening remarks. Pueblo's a home of heroes, okay? And yet we have problems. And I don't want to get off to another subject, but at this point, but the Art Center is something very prominent and important in this community. So with that, you know, the budget for the last 3 years has been 300,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we're going to keep it at 300,000.
We're
And
gonna-
so is that what they're asking for? They're not asking, because I'm not sure.
They asked for 300,000. I recommended 0.
Wow. I don't see
recommended
that.
That they can apply through CSAC like they used to do previously, and it wasn't a non-departmental fund.
Go to
Or
CSAC?
2018.
They're going to go to CSAC?
That's what my recommendation would be.
I'm not with that. I'm really sorry. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Counselor Flores?
Yeah, I just wanted to correct the year there, 14, 17. They were in the CSAP area, and the council specifically, we made a decision through our attorneys at that time that they should not have been on CSAP. They should have been in the non-departmental budget. That was made back, I think, in 2017. Again, we may not own the building. And is that going to be a criteria now that we only give to nonprofits that own real property?
It's not a criteria, Counselor, but when we're looking at doing budget cuts, we look at the city properties and the ones that we have to fund before we look at the ones that the county owns.
Right. They brought in last year $4.8 million in tourism. And of course, I haven't calculated what the percentage of taxes those people came in from out of town, but I'm sure that they, again, this is one of those areas where we need to take into consideration, it would be like any kind of product that's sold out there, that as they increase or their sales decrease, they also decrease their advertising, which is not the case. It's actually the reverse. They advertise if their sales are dropping in order to get more customers. And I think this is a classic example of shooting ourselves in the foot again, just because we don't own the building, and they bring much more than 300,000 to the city. And that doesn't even count the 2 employees that they utilize for tourism, doesn't include all the local sales of caterers and all the other parties, weddings, that kind of stuff. So just my opinion.
Counselor Latino?
Thank you. To piggyback off of Councilor Flores's comments, again, they're bringing tourism into this community, and that's positive. There are negatives here too, and we'll probably be talking about that because I have some real concerns about that too. But it's a situation, again, the Art Center brings positive to the community, and anything that brings positive, we need to support. That's all I have to say.
Counselor Martinez?
Mayor, do you have a slide with all of the non-departmental asks on here?
Not in this one.
When we've gone over it before, many of the recommendations that you are recommending for this fiscal year mirror what the requests were in 2019. Can you talk about why that is?
Yeah, because we are looking at the revenue as what we were looking at in 2019. So we need to be making cuts back to where we were taking in the sales tax dollars, property taxes. We can't continue on $130 million budget, taking $10 million out of reserves every year. So we need to get back to the more flatline budget on what it was like before COVID and before all of this surplus of revenue came into the city. The city took in $36 million alone that was essentially spread to the community, that people went and bought things and paid sales tax, and we're just not seeing those revenue sources like we saw back then. So when we were looking at a good baseline to go to, it was 2019, 2020. We even looked at what 2021 would look like. And so there has to be cuts made somewhere. I mean, we're here to hear the council's recommendation. This is our fourth budget meeting at this point. I've not heard a substantial number for any of these. Non-departmental has been thrown out, or has anybody come to my office and talked to me about what that would look like or what the changes needed to be? So that's what we're here to hear tonight, and to make the seven of you to make a decision going forward. That's what these meetings are for.
So what I'm hearing you say is that our revenue is very comparable to what the revenue was in 2019. And for that reason, the recommendations from you are mirror the same awards that these nonprofits got in 2019.
Sure.
Is that true for the departments as well?
I would say that depends what department it is. Like police, we gave more money from 2025 because we have more police officers. So we're not gonna have salary savings to transfer back and forth. So if we don't budget it for 2025, there's a good chance in the middle of 2025, I'm gonna come to you and say, we have more police officers than we did at the beginning of the year. We don't have salary savings to transfer and cover the operating. So I wanted the council to be made aware at that point. You've seen Public Works budget grow substantially over the last several years, but you've seen a lot of grants that the city has received, a lot of projects that the city received. We've paved a lot of roads that need professional services, contract services, more employees. So as you see more going on in the city and the city has taken more money in, you're gonna see more expenditures. So maybe not in 2025 are you gonna see those huge cuts, because we're still paving the same amount of roads and doing the same amount of projects as that we had been doing. But farther out, I'm sure you'll see significant decreases in those operating budgets as well.
And can you talk about, so when the departments submitted their budgets for next fiscal year, and they're making their requests, I'm assuming that not all of those requests were fulfilled.
So I think we had 38 new employees. All requests were denied for the employees except for the 6 new people to man the new fire station. So that's
38 new employees
38 new employees were asked for by the numerous departments in the city.
a-
So
across the whole city.
across the whole city,
Okay.
every single one of them was denied except for the 6 people to man the new fire station. We went through 8,000 line items, which with every department that we sat down and went through and said, tell me what this line item does. Is there a way you can cut back? The only line items that increased where if it was going to be a professional service that increased because it's something that we seek outside for. We were not just increasing because another year, had come and gone. In fact, we actually went through, and if money hadn't been spent when we rolled over 2023, we cut those departments down to be more realistic for 2025.
So
We were
budgets,
Comparing 23 to 24.
department budgets also were not 100% fulfilled,
No. not
similarly
in the-
to
not
these
in the-
requests.
Not in the least. And these were conversations that were had before that they presented to me. So there were some departments that you saw no change whatsoever. I think planning was one of them that came, transit, HR, the law department, they asked for additional employees that they did not receive. They also asked for additional budgeted items. And we actually took money from the mayor's budget and the city council professional services budget to fill the professional services that the law department needs. So it was very thorough, it was very time consuming. There were lots of no's, we can't fund this year. Let's see what next year brings. So
off the top of your head, or Danny, what's the 38 employees that were requested? What did that translate to in terms of a monetary value?
I
I believe we have that in a slide from our first presentation.
I don't have a dollar amount, but I can tell you there were 38 new full-time positions were requested. One for purchasing, one for airport, one for civil service, 4 for finance, the 6 for fire, which we did approve, 2 for fleet, 1 for legal, 4 for parks, 4 for police, and 14 for public works.
So give or take, we're looking at over 3 million based on 38 employees.
3 million that was denied funding.
Correct.
Okay. And that was own city staff. Okay, thanks.
President Aliff.
I mean, for transparency's sake, in 2018, when we were looking at a 19 budget, we literally went through the same process where we got a folder with the non-departmental book, which I'm sure in 23 and 20 or 22 and 23 that everybody went through. But the process was anything but thorough and gone through with a fine tooth comb. They were literally presented to the mayor's office. The mayor put them in a binder, came back with the mayor's recommendations, and city council reacted to whatever those recommendations were, just like council is reacting now to the recommendations. But one thing that I think that we forget is between 2019 to 2023, the beginning of 23 was the COVID deal. Many of our non-departmental contracts were struggling. There was a lot of issues, and we had a mayor that was very lenient with moving forward with giving them more money because we were collecting more money. We had that sales tax boon, and we spent every dime that we had. And if you look at the numbers, where if you just take the zoo, when 2018 and 19 was at 637,000, 20 and 21, 675,000, then 800, 930 million, 1.1 is the ask for this year. I don't know how they operated well at 650 or 637,000, 680,000, and now all of a sudden it needs to be 1.2 million. I mean, that's literally, 500,000 more in capital outlay. And you have to question whether how they're being operated. That's not our expertise. I mean, none of us know how to run a zoo. That's why we hire a nonprofit. We hire one of these groups to, whether it be HSPPR or the Zoological Society, to run these operations, because we believe in their expertise to be able to do that. But we've created this atmosphere of no problem. I know the first 4 years that I was on city council, nobody questioned anything. The very first year I said, what we need to do is institute a 20% reduction in all of these expenses over 5 years and wean everybody off of the city. It's really not a function of government, of a municipal government, to fund every nonprofit that comes through the door. I understand our contractual obligations to the zoo and HSPPR and such. But, that was met with, they wanted to take me out and string me up. And it was a long line of 6 council members that said I was crazy. And it just continued to go to the numbers just continue to go up and up and up and up. And it's interesting, when we had a city manager, the city manager would bring forth the recommendations, and they were much more realistic from a budget perspective. And then when we got our first mayor, it just went out of control, in my opinion. And that's why we end up here today. So they've had this huge growth over those 2 or 3 years. And now we want to get back to reality, and it's like it's the end of the world. When you talk about the Arts Center, we never gave any money to except through CSAC, as Councilor Flores said, and then we put them back towards the city, gave them $50,000, and then all of a sudden it was up to $300,000, and nobody argued about it. And there was not a long, huge process of vetting that and seeing whether we needed to do that or anything else to that matter. So I think that you're doing the right thing. And I agree with Councilor Flores. This is a distraction for me, because this happens every single year in the budget process. We get bogged down in non-departmental expenses. We spend all of our time arguing about non-departmental expenses when we need to cut our personnel expenses 10 to 15%. And we don't even talk about that. I mean, I think I'm literally the only person on council that said, you have $100 million going out in personnel expenses. If you cut that by 10%, you cover your deficit and you have a balanced budget. You don't even have to talk about departmental expenses or non-departmental expenses or anything else like that. But for some reason, we just don't want to attack that. You know, when you look at the summary reports in the budget, personnel costs from 2022 to the proposed 2025 have gone up $28 million. So that's $7 million a year. Operating costs from 12.5 million to 15.8 million. And we're not, and I understand what Councilor Martinez says, well, how many jobs were asked for? Somehow we're saving $3 million by turning those down, but we're not saving. We just didn't add another expense of $3 million. I think that the administration did a fine job of taking those funded but vacant positions, eliminating the ones that weren't necessary and putting that back to the budget. But it really didn't, it's really not addressing the structural deficit that we have, is that we're too big as a government. We have too many employees and too much money going out for the size of city that we are. And I think that maybe if we took a long, hard look at what other cities that are our size are spent, some cities like, I think I heard Councilor Flores say this before, you look at Centennial, Colorado, and Centennial, Colorado, same size as us, but they bring in 3 times the amount of money and they have less employees. And you wonder, what the heck are they doing? And how come we're in this predicament that we're in? I just think it, and where this is a disadvantage to the city council, and I'll bring back the same argument that I had the very first part of the year, is it's very difficult as a city councilor to not be involved in the process and not have any say-so until 3 or 4 weeks before you're going to vote on the budget. I could say until the cows come home, I think you need to cut 10% out of the personnel budget. And you would say, well, how are you going to do that? I have no idea how I would do that, but I should have been involved in the very beginning to see if that was even a possibility, and trying to define that that's an area that we need to work on. And I just hope as a city council that at some point we can get our act together and demand that we're a part of the budget process, and we're not asking for things. I mean, you have a week to make your recommendations, and we vote on or 2 weeks and we vote on a budget. It's just a problem. And I think that we're up against it. Again, I'm not blaming the administration for anything. I think that you've done a fine job of cutting what you can cut. and making the changes. So
I
we're
just
only
have to
sitting at
say
$8 million
you weren't
deficit.
Involved the entire time. We had several budget presentations that you requested which departments you wanted to have come before you. When you got a chance to see the personnel ask, the budget asked, how many employees that they would be asking for. And there were no comments made at that point. So Council President Aliff, to say that you have not been involved this entire time is not fair or accurate, because
true.
they did come because you requested them, because you had this conversation with me previously. So you've been apprised of what's been going on this entire time for the departments that you had requested. I don't disagree with you that it's top heavy when it comes to employees. I know over the last 5 years, we've added 100 new positions in the city of Pueblo. But as these positions become vacant, we're not filling them. And you will continue to see throughout the year, unfunded positions that we don't need come before the council, and we'll abolish them and return that money back to the general fund. We've done 500,000 so far for, that will be wrapped up in this budget of just the positions that are open right now. But as people retire, people move on to different careers, you'll see those come before you. So I don't disagree, though. There's several positions that people could be doing different job duties, or projects might slow down and maybe we don't need these certain employees. But to say that you were not involved, that is not
Well,
accurate.
let me clarify. It's impossible for anybody on this city council to make a cognizant argument, a coherent argument for a budget presentation or a budget request from a department when we have no access to what was coming down the pike. That's what I'm saying. You didn't know until how long ago when you got the front page of what the budget was going to be?
Mhm.
You know, where you
And
see.
I shared that with you as soon as I got it,
Exactly. So, but that was just a month ago or a month and a half ago
a couple months.
that we saw that, but we had the presentations
Sure.
before we saw
And we
that.
spoke about that, how if you had the presentations beforehand, how it would be very difficult for the council to make any decisions because we didn't know where we were as a
Exactly.
city. We don't disagree.
Exactly. So yeah, that's, that's my rant. I've said it 1,000
I
times.
know you have. And, I just want to touch on the fact too, I think I spoke about this before. But if if we're wanting to cut staff and we're wanting to cut wages, that per the union, the 3 union contracts, you have to cut part-time employees first. So you can't just pick from department and say, cut this department 10%. That's not the way that it works. It has to be part-time employees first. That part-time employee amount is only $3.2 million. That's not going to balance the budget. And if the council decides to cut part-time employees, you're not going to have the city park rides. You're not going to have swim instructions. You're not going to have parks and football and soccer and all those great amenities and services that we provide to the community, because those are all provided by all of our part-time employees. So I ask you, when you talk about cutting the staff, there's ways to do it in which we're trying to address vacant positions and positions we don't think that we need any longer. But when you talk about cutting wages by 10% or departments by 10%, that's impossible until you cut all the part-time employees first.
Counselor Flores.
I don't think any of us would ever want to cut wages. I mean, that's not even in the hemisphere. We got contractual union contracts that would prevent that. So I don't know why we're going down that road. The reason that I haven't come and seen or talked to you about some of the ideas that I have, the charter actually gives us the map. It says, after conclusion of such public hearing, the council may insert new items of expenditures, increases or decreases. So that's why I've been waiting. And my question is timing also. Are we having another public session on November the 4th? And then we will be voting the following week for the budget?
Yep. So first presentation is on the 11th and the second is on the 25th. And I think Councilor Maestri set some time aside. We canceled tomorrow's meeting, but I believe you set some time aside, Councilor Maestri, still for
A few minutes.
a few
yes.
minutes on November 4th.
Yeah, a few minutes on November 4th.
And then, since that's still up there, I wanted to mention that the reason it's been so flat at 350 approximately, that is right in the middle of COVID. The zoo literally shut down and didn't have the same amount of employees, did not have any chance of revenue. They were just like everyone else. They were shut down. And I know we helped them probably through the ARPA money in some way. But that's why that's so flat. And of course, in 2022, when they ramped up, they certainly needed our help. But without meeting with these people, how would you know that? I mean, there's so much history in all of this stuff that's what's frustrating to me.
Counselor Martinez.
I just want to note, so to Counselor Flores's question about the process, there is a public hearing tonight
Yes.
Mhm.
for the budget. So hopefully we'll hear more public commentary tonight. And then in terms of the staff conversation, I think we spoke earlier this year at the very beginning of the year when the law department requested a couple of additional positions because of how busy the law department was at the time, because the amount of ordinances and work and just overall system-wide city work has increased, thus needing more positions. And I think we see that across all city departments. And so while I understand that, yeah, it's top heavy, it's because there's been a tremendous amount of work that's increased over the last several years. And we see that all the time, whether that's the attorneys needing to review ordinances or planning and zoning meeting with all of the developers and, in their weekly meetings. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work that's increased over the last couple of years, which is why it's necessary for staff.
Counselor Gomez.
Yeah, considering, or Dan, Mayor, considering the sales and use tax revenue is basically negative.
Yeah, as of, so this year's budget, 2024's budget was based on a revenue increase of 4.2%. So that's what we budgeted for this entire year,
Okay.
right? It's what we planned for. The sales tax as of last month, we were down 0.07%.
So considering that, taking that into account, do you have any idea of a range or numbers of what city staff we need to maintain to run the city at its optimal? Or I want to say optimal best, but to make it run efficiently? Any ideas on that?
No, I mean, if you're talking about cutting staff, we would have to cut part-time employees before you could cut anybody else.
So how does that, when you explain that to me?
So each department has part-time workers, the parks, for example. So we hire seasonal workers who help with concessions, who help with the kiddie rides, swimming lessons, who are the coaches and teach kids football and soccer and do all the part-time work that our full-time employees don't work. Since they're part-time, they don't necessarily fall under the negotiations, the union negotiation contracts. So per our 3 unions, they require the city to lay off all part-time employees before you can lay off any full-time city employees. So we would be cutting tremendous services to the community if we wanted to lay off part-time employees.
A tough box you're in, I'll tell you that. All right, thank you.
Counselor Latino.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, if the revenues are down, then I think we need to be considering the fact that every department needs to be put in a position of freeze. Am I making sense? In other
No,
words,
I don't know what that means, position of freeze.
well,
Explain it to me, Counselor.
what I'm trying to say is looking at the budget, we don't have the monies we've had in the past.
Correct.
Right. And we're cutting some programs, but we're not cutting others. But we're giving raises to certain departments, i.e. the police department as an example.
Mhm.
And please don't misunderstand me. I understand what security means. Okay. And safety.
Yes.
That's a priority.
We know, you want
But-
the National Guard.
Pardon me?
You want the National
That's
Guard.
exactly right. It's gotten to the point where this community is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so the police, it's very important that we have the police officers.
And not only are we short police, we're short deputies in the sheriff's department
Yeah.
too. Yeah, this town's in trouble.
Mhm.
So again, it's a situation, we're talking about budget tonight. If we're going to cut budget, then we need to take into consideration, we don't give raises to anybody.
So I would tell you.
If the
Counselor
economy
Lat-
is that, if the economy in this community is that bad, then you don't give raises.
Counselor Latino, the council has already voted on the negotiated contracts
I
for all
understand.
3 unions.
I understand, but if it's a negotiated contract and you don't have money, you can't give money you don't have if it's a negotiated contract or not. And working in the systems that I worked in, which are the largest school systems in the state, if you don't have money, you don't have money. You don't get raises. Teachers don't get raises. Classified employees don't get raises. Principals don't get raises. Superintendents don't get raises. Nobody
Yes.
gets
And
raises.
then I think that we will have a much harder time filling our shortage that you spoke about in the police department if we're not paying a comparable wage to other departments, because I know that's one thing we struggle with retention and recruitment is the pay.
But is it really terrible? Are the wages for our police officers and our fire department really terrible? And again, I have a great deal of compassion for both departments. They mean a great deal to me as they do this community in terms of safety and security. But if you don't have the dough, you don't dole the dough out.
I can tell you that the city of Pueblo only pays 85% of what other communities up and down the Front Range pay. So other officers working in other departments that are getting 100% of the pay, the city is already only max paying them 85% of the pay, even though that they're doing the same work, sometimes answering more calls, more difficult calls, more serious calls. And so I think that that's something that we have to really take into account for and consider when we talk about giving our employees the raises that are much needed.
Again, there's cities that are much larger than Pueblo and they have more difficult problems in some situations in Pueblo. Example, we're talking about Aurora, which is the 3rd largest city in the state,
Mhm.
and what they're dealing with there. And we have similar problems here.
Sure.
Okay. But again, if you don't have the dough, you need to start thinking about other things. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mayor, I noticed that is a talking point about cities our size. We're at 85%, they're at 100% of, the,
Comparables. Mhm.
yes. But they are also at 3 times the amount of revenue that we have.
They are, they have,
I mean, that's huge. And to say, and I'm not trying to discount this.
that's why we
It's-
look at
if there's
85.
Anybody that has a problem with giving raises, we all agreed to that here on council.
Mhm.
So it's kind of redundant for us to say, oh, now why are people getting raises? Well, if they're voting for it, that's why they're getting raises. I mean,
Correct.
that's what's happened here. Yes, this is a difficult situation. I've watched this for the past 2 years I've been on council. The only recommendations for the past 2 years, even though we were in a deficit, were to increase non-departmental asks and non-departmental asks, whether that be a nonprofit or a contracted position. There was never any increase to any of the city funding other than the normal raises that were negotiated through the unions. When we went to approve the last 2 budgets. And when we look at your deficit of 8.5 million, say,
Mhm.
okay, it varies compared to the other years because the deficit from the prior year had all of those unfunded positions and projects in their deficit, correct?
Yeah, that's why you'll see if you remember, Councilwoman, I think we transferred 10 million
Mm-hmm.
and for 2024's budget, but our projected is with all the empty positions in the city that we're only gonna need about 600,000 transferred. And a lot of that has to do with the police department's open positions.
So we are looking at only 600,000 for 2024.
Correct.
So, but those unfunded positions were in there and they're not in there.
Correct.
But then you come over here and you've taken them out for 2025, correct?
Correct.
And we're still at 8
Yes.
million, 8.5 million over. So in actuality, we're over and then unfunded cushion that we always had, because we always called it cushion, is gone. So are we better this year than we were last year, even with these cuts? We're not.
Well, you'll see halfway in the year, like you're seeing when we ran these numbers, that 515 has probably changed, but that 8.5 will change significantly because of all the open positions that we have in the city.
But I thought you took them out.
I'm talking about police officers, positions that come open that we still will need in the
Mhm.
city. Those positions that are still required will be in there.
Okay. Okay, anyone else? Counselor Flores?
You know, even with the concerns I had with the non-departmental nonprofits that we give money to, in my mind, they're very small amounts. I mean, it's not like, you know, I keep hearing a lot of things here as though we're going to jump off a bridge and commit suicide here pretty soon. I don't think we're at that level. I mean, some of the things that you're suggesting are just the normal kind of stuff that happens. I don't want the impression to the public that somehow we're going to have a mass layoff of part-time employees or full-time employees. We're not at that stage. I don't even know why we went down that road to talk about that.
We're not out that stage yet,
No, I'm
Counselor.
but I'm not criticizing
Yeah.
you. I'm talking generally here
Sure.
about this discussion that we don't need to sound the alarm bells when there is no reason to do that. What we're talking about here is the normal kind of business stuff that you do. You do that as a family sometimes. And I don't think that we need to be talking about all of these superlatives that we're talking about that we're, you know, that laying people off and not abiding by our contractual agreements with the unions. We're not even there yet. And I'm with you. You know, we've got to do this. I understand that. And I don't have a problem with it. But for us to go off and give the public the impression that we're on the verge of filing bankruptcy or something is crazy. We're not even near that.
I don't think that we're not near that for this year, right?
And
So
I'm
we
not
still
saying,
have-
I'm talking about all this discussion, not.
We have $21 million left in
Mm.
reserves, but when you talk about this year alone, taking 8.6 out of reserves to
Mhm.
balance the budget. And this is a very lean budget that we presented you with the non-departmental cuts that we did, with the abolished positions, with the no additional operating and the no additional city employees. So if you stay this lean for the next 3 years, Counselor, you will empty the reserves.
Oh.
And that is if we maintain the sales tax that we're maintaining right now. If sales tax continues to decline, our revenues will continue to decline, which will just increase the amount of money that we're going to have to transfer for fund balance. So I'm bringing this all to your awareness now. So in 3 years, when we sit up here and we have run through the fund balance because we've not done anything to increase revenues for the city and we've not cut back any more of the expenditures, that's where we're at. That 21 million is not going to change very much. And the 8.6 million deficit for 2025 is not going to change very much. Wages will compound again in 2026. So you'll see an even higher increase in wages in 2026 when everything starts to compound. So this is best case scenario. So I do think that these conversations are relevant. I do think that the community needs to know that the city is not taking in as much money as it previously was, that we're not inflating sales tax revenue like the previous administration did, to where we thought we were bringing in more money and we were granting more money to non-departmentals and nonprofits. This is a realization of what the budget is, skin and bones, and as lean as we can get it at this point. So there is concerns, not in 2025, but if we maintain down the way we've been spending, we won't have money in 3 years.
The unfunded positions that we have every year, and I don't know if we've ever done an analysis going back 5 years, but is the unfunded or positions that are not filled, there's always, at one time we had close to 50 in the police department or another 40. Are those positions still in the budget, even though we have a trend, knowing that we're not going to fill every position? I mean, all communities are having that issue. but can you tell me?
Yes, they are, absolutely. So we plan on having a full staff, and that's how we budget. So if we look at 2024, when we budgeted $10 million into the hole versus our expected outcome now of maybe $500,000 in the hole, a lot of that has to do with unexpended resources that we had in the budget, the positions that were not filled, and were not expended to the city. But as far as forecasting for that, we can't plan on having vacant positions.
So your plan is that you're going to include full employment at 100% every year when you do the budget.
All positions that
Right.
are authorized and funded.
And
yes.
even though we might have a trend for the last 10 years that there was 50, on average, 50 to 60 slots that never were filled, we're still going to include that as though it's an expenditure.
And that's where,
And I guess that's because of GASB, right?
right, we have to budget for expenses that we can reasonably ascertain that we will expense. So we're planning on filling all positions. Now, the mayor has gone through the budget, taken a look at the positions that historically have not been filled, have not been funded, and we have either eliminated them or unfunded them.
It is a cushion, though. Thank you.
President.
Thank
Early.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't trying to make everybody think that they should jump off a bridge or that we were going to jump off a bridge. But literally the city's revenue in the last 5 years has grown $50 million a year. 50 million. So you take that 50 million and you're still $8 million in the hole. Think of this as your house. And you got a $50,000 a year raise, but at the end of the year, you didn't have your 50,000, you were $8,000 in the hole. How many years can you go by spending that $8,000 out of your savings account before you don't have any money left? I think this has been critical for the last 4 years. The last 4.5 years, we should have been talking about this. When we were getting all of that money, we didn't save a dime. What we did is hired, gave raises, spent money, funded more, did all these things because government always thinks if you have it, spend it. If we don't have enough, we'll raise taxes. We'll get another fee here. We'll get something else here, and somehow we'll make it work. But you know, government has that insatiable appetite that they don't live like we do at our homes, where we have to cut the cable bill and we can't go out to dinner 3 nights a week. We can only go out 2 nights a week. We don't have the ability to raise taxes on ourselves and things like that. So this should have been addressed a long time ago. And I'm very thankful that we're talking about it now. And I'm very thankful that the administration is taking it so seriously and doing the work that you're doing to make the cuts that you made. Obviously, we need to do more, and we need to be very cognizant of this moving forward because this is a problem. And as the mayor just said, if we don't address this and if we don't take action, it will be 2 or 3, 4 years. We don't know when, but that reserve that's down to 21 million, I believe, in 2025 is going to be gone. And the cushions that we talk about are a couple million here, maybe 500,000 there. That won't last over the weekend, the way this government spends. So we got to make sure that that we just stay on top of it. And I appreciate that.
Yes, and part of that cushion is that real need that to increase our police force. So we talk about, oh, well, it's a cushion, but then if we fulfill it, we are hitting that deficit of 8 million. And that's one of our biggest needs is a bigger police force. Counselor Gomez.
Yeah, just for clarification, because we had discussed this last time, Mayor. I was always working under the assumption that we had 20 million reserves and you said it was 23 actually. The numbers are saying 20 million. Can you explain how you went from 20 to 23 million again? I know you explained it to me last time, but I kind of forgot.
Counselor, so maybe 2 regular meetings ago, we rolled over 2023's budget and the expenditures and the revenues, and we looked at it. And there was about $3 million that was left over from 2023 that was unspent. So that rolled over into the reserves. And that's how the number grew.
Was there any discussion about Everest Steel being behind on some of their taxes?
So
And
that's
that worries me because does that also represent that
sure.
that great body of employees that we have there? Are they in trouble? Are they not? And I think the public has a right to know.
From
Is
what
that-
I can speak to is it wasn't that they were behind on their taxes. They owed the city, I believe it was use tax, 3 use tax payments that have been split over from September, October, and November. And the city has received and will receive payments of $1.3 million. But those are again, one-time funds and those will revert back to the fund balance.
Counselor Boston.
Yeah, so I was kind of just waiting to hear what some other people had to say first, but I keep hearing the thing of business budget, household budgets being brought up. And non-departmentals, obviously, like you're saying, which is something that's a small portion, but as a business owner, as a household budgeter, some of the first things that you cut as a business owner, marketing, donations, things like that. When you don't have money to give out, when you're running in a deficit and you want to stay positive and run a successful business, you can't give out money you don't have because then you don't have the opportunity to have the funds to run the business that you have. Obviously, as the city, we have a household budget of certain things we have to pay, whether, you can make whatever references you want to be, rent, utilities, whatever. The city has things that they have to pay. And we are in a bad situation. We've been running in the red for years. If we run in the red in a household for years, you lose your car, you lose your house, you become homeless, things like that. So as a city, it's reckless to continually spend more than you have. Obviously, if we had free money and we had more of ARPA dollars or COVID funds coming in, sure, I'm sure we'd be funding more nonprofits. We'd be funding all the asks of all these different departments, but we need to be realistic in the fact that we're running in the red. And to say that we have a cushion of police officers and it's been a trend for years and you want to cut those positions is absolutely insane to me because every meeting darn near, we have people complaining about public safety. And that is one of the biggest complaints of this community, that people don't feel safe. Why are businesses going to want to come here? Why do people want to move here? So to try to think that we're going to save money by abolishing positions in the police department is insanity to me. So those are some of the things. And then one of the questions I did have is you brought up references to city departments making asks for funding for specific purposes. And then when you were referencing these cuts to certain non-departmentals, I know you said that they made asks for certain purposes, whether it be funding a position or marketing. And then you looked into these non-departmentals and seeing if they were using the money they asked for these specific purposes. And you noticed that some of them weren't using the money that they asked for the reason that they asked for it. So did that have anything to do with the decisions you made and some of the cuts that you decided to make?
I would say that we don't know at this point what the funding has been used for. That'll be part of the reporting tool for 2025 when we go and see what the city grants the money for 2025. What they had asked in their non-departmental ask to make sure that those funds are being spent the way that they said that they would be spent.
Okay. I think you're doing a great job, obviously, in a sense, like you said, you got to start somewhere. Maybe this is a trial run to see what does work, what doesn't work, but obviously we got to start somewhere. So I think, this is a good start at adjusting the budget in the right way.
Counselor Latino.
Again, security and safety of the community is a priority. So if my comments have led people to believe that I'm not for security as a priority in this community, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. It is the number one priority. And it is the number one concern that I have of this community right now, today. We had 2 incidents last week in my district alone. Not last week in one area. The Great Divide, which is on Santa Fe and Fourth, has been trashed 2 different times in the last 2 weeks. The windows broken, damaged, shot out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 1. 2, we had an incident at a Vidmar Motors, another business in my particular district that's been a part of this community for decades. Vidmar Motors, et cetera. Pontiac and Buick, and not Buick, but Pontiac and Oldsmobile, et cetera. Okay. And so again, we're not helping ourselves by cutting back on safety and security. But at the same time, when we're looking at a budget, we have to look at everything from the superintendent, meaning the boss, okay, to the principal, to the assistant principal, to the teacher, to the safety and security person, to the custodian. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I did not say that I wanted to cut the police department, any position. What I asked was how many open positions we have that we can't fill. If we can fill all 40 to 45 positions that we have right now, I would be all for it, and it's in the budget. How you could have misinterpreted that I wanted to cut the police department is just unfathomable that you would say that. The other thing is that all I'm saying about the non-departmental budgets, going back to that family metaphor and analogy, it would be like telling the kids, we're sorry, we're not going to give you your allowance for the going forward. We all gotta cut. So if you could picture the allowance as being our non-departmental, I'm just saying it's such a small amount, okay, that it's not going to have the effect you do unless we look at the entire budget. And then marketing, I was in sales my whole life. Okay, I would never have cut marketing. That's how I got my business. And when things were tough, I would do more marketing. I guess we just have a difference of opinion on that.
Okay. Well, you know, what I have to say is I realize COVID came along and devastated a lot of these non-departmentals, the city. But you know who it really devastated? Were the private businesses in this community were devastated, and they didn't have anything to fall back on. We gave out that $1 million loan. And I don't even know if, you know, what those loans were at with those, if they're even being paid back. But they had to close their businesses. People had to close their businesses in this town. Families struggled during the COVID. And they didn't have the government to fall back on. They didn't have the grants that were given, COVID grant monies that were given because don't forget, I mean, let's not forget, we put out a lot of grants and for the nonprofits to get back up on their feet and stuff. The private businesses and the community and the taxpayers in this community didn't have a lot of those resources to fall back on. And if we're here in 2020 going into 2025 and there's still a struggle left over from that, you know, they're lucky they did have us to fall back on the city for that amount of time. And we're just trying to do the best we can do right now to keep everything going. And there's nothing wrong with forecasting what can potentially happen if we continue to run into deficit and talk about openly like that. So it's no surprise. So it's no surprise to anyone. And let's just hope the revenue goes up and that we can continue to function and everybody can stay employed. So with that, are you, Councilor Gomez?
Yeah, in reference to revenues hopefully going up, do you have any projections? Is it looking sour? Are we getting better? What's your feeling?
Oh, we're continuing to decrease, and we have been for several
I'm
months.
sorry.
Sorry, we're continuing to decrease, and we have been for several months. People will be spending money in November and December because it's Christmas time. So we usually see a little bit of a bump there, but I don't think it will be a big enough bump to make up for that 4.2% increase that this budget was built off of, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All righty. Well, is everyone done for this evening? With that being said, we are going to, are you finished, Mayor?
I
I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to, reiterate that if there is going to be a change or there's an ask or a concern that those comments and concerns come before, so that if staff needs to go in and look at certain items to be prepared for the council come November 4th, I just ask that you bring that to our attention sooner rather than later so that we can have it prepared and sent out to you in a timely manner so that you all also have time to review what one of your asks may be or may not.
Okay, thank you. This evening is, again, it is October 28th, Monday. We are adjourning this work session at 6:50 PM. We'll be returning at 7:10. Thank you.
And